Just on the civilian targets, there is. I've been watching this, and I do speak to a lot of people from Russia, and they kind of play it down, largely speaking. There is this specific concerted effort by the Ukrainians to attack your Russian energy. What's your thoughts on this?
Well, I'm not going to say where I'm at, but I'll just say I drove further than what I'm going to say, but I put out a video, me driving down, family. I put in the video of the first 1,200 kilometers, and there is fuel. On on the interstate, it's a bit more difficult because the cities will get fueled up first. But there's fuel. Yeah, I never let my tank go down more than a fourth or third before it filled up. Yes, you figure you add a couple extra hours on the trip, and just in case you have to stay in line. But even the lines, it's hit or miss. You get in one place, there's a line, big line. You skip over it, go to the next place, and it's empty. You just drive in and fill up because everybody's packed up on the previous station, sitting in the lines. But most of the lines, you didn't see more than about 4 or 5 cars per pump, and this is considering a lot of Russians are going south for vacation. This is the same crap. Are there hits? Yes, there are hits. Most of what you're seeing being hit are oil or fuel storage facilities. The problem is if you hit if you've ever been to a refinery, refineries are 7-10 kilometers long, hundreds of kilometers of pipe. All the pipes are under pressure. The pressure is monitored by valves, which are controlled by computers. So if you hit the piping, and the moment the pressure falls, the computers close the valves, and that's it. You don't get the big, pretty flame that Western media so loves to show on there. There's no point in hitting the piping, which is pretty easy to replace anyways. And the vessels, most of the vessels, or even though they're handmade, they can be replaced within a week to 2 weeks from a lot of different shops in Russia to manufacture them. So they hit these fuel storage facilities. Nobody's going to put them out. There's no point in putting them out. They just cut off the pipe going in and out of them and let them burn out. But that's what the big pictures, the big flames. It's storage facilities. They get replaced relatively quickly because they're not high tech per se. So, yeah, I mean, look, you've had the same story.
Stan has frozen. No, I don't want to do drama and say the sirens and then he froze. So
a lot of these refineries. Yeah.
Oh, you froze. Go ahead.
For a sec. Well, yeah. A lot of these refineries have been hit multiple times, and they're back up and running within a week, 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks. But this is not anything major. And yes, there's fuel. And while we're at it, Russia did buy fuel from India that was refined with Russian oil. And the Europeans were all laughing about it. Aha, yeah, I see, we're damaging Russia. But this just tells you that basically most of the European leadership are knuckle-dragging mouth breathers. They're ignorant, inbred fools because the 400,000 tons that Russia bought of fuel from India was going to Europe, was going to the EU, a chunk of which would have also gone to the Ukrainians. So, they're laughing about it, but those tankers aren't coming to Europe. Europe is screwed, further screwed. Okay, so as all these things happen, it tends to boomerang back to the Europeans and the European leadership that just continues to squeeze its peasants down further and further, squeeze whatever blood and oil it can get out of its peasants. And the peasants don't rebel, so I guess the peasants enjoy it. What other lesson can you take from that?
Okay, now moving on to the other element of what's been happening today, which is Trump basically is saying that he's going to escalate the war. He's not fully decided whether he's going to do it. Israel is...
Which one? Which war?
The war. Great question. The war in Iran. And so he claims there's going to be major bombing happening. What's your thoughts on this?
Well, Trump, first of all, Trump is now claiming that, almost on a daily basis, the Iranians better surrender by the end of the day. Oh, they better surrender. Yes, we're really going to bomb them. This has become, I don't know how many times he's beaten them. I don't know how many times he's wiped them out. Somebody's keeping track. I'm sure it's got to be at least 40, 50 times now that he's bombed them into oblivion, and they're begging him for a deal, and so on. So this is almost, at first it was done to play the markets, and Trump made a lot of money. He was saying he made something like $4 billion off of it, 3,000 trades. That's just Trump. So plus that inner circle of his family members, etc. They're all placing bets every time he opens his mouth. And if you notice, normally it would do something like on Friday, and then by Monday we have a deal. So the markets are he'd play on the markets. Nowadays, though, he's not doing the deal part. He's just constantly threatening. But I think he's painted himself into a corner. He doesn't know what to do. He's got very limited escalation options. Like I said, they can bring in the B-1s and the B-2 bombers to bomb Tehran, but Tehran has S-400s. They can reach out and touch one of those B-2 bombers at about 260 kilometers out, or 360 kilometers out. I'm sorry. So do you want to bring him in and risk him? I mean, a B-2 bomber going down is going to be hitting the media as it's falling out of the sky in today's media circle. That would be on the info stream instantly. Especially if you take some of the pilots prisoners, that would be a PR disaster for Trump. This war, just to understand this from the American side, this is censuses have been taken, so about after the Korean War. This war is the most unpopular war that ever happened. It's more unpopular than Vietnam. But the difference between this war and Vietnam is Vietnam didn't become unpopular from day one. Vietnam had to get to that point. And it took almost 5-6 years before it got to that unpopular level. This war was that unpopular from day one. That's why you constantly you had the Trump administration constantly. This is about nukes. This is about freeing Iranian women. This is about the Gulf. They don't know how to sell this war. They're trying everything. They don't know how to sell this illegal war of aggression. We're going to save the Iranian people. Did they ask you to be saved? We're going to take the shawls off the women. Well, actually, they don't even have to wear them if they don't want to anymore. That's been liberalized. But that's a pretty shitty reason to go bomb a country, because of dress codes. I'm sorry, they're not wearing mini skirts and prostituting themselves on the streets. Is that the problem? That's the Western standard. They've tried everything, and they can't sell it. They can't sell it, and it's the most unpopular war, period, in American history since North Korea, since the Korean War. They've got a big problem. They lose a B-2 bomber, that's just going to be a bigger hit. People saw the videos in Jordan. The fact that they're talking about, I don't think anybody with half a brain cell, or at least one brain cell, believes the crap about, there's only 3 people that died in Jordan. You saw the firestorm, you saw the explosion, you saw those containers flying in every direction. To say there's only 3 guys that died? Seriously? I mean, the mega crowd that are left will believe anything Trump says. They're groupies, they're fanatics. But everybody else is the other 80% of the population. I don't think anybody believes that crap. So, I've heard estimates from very good sources that over 1,000 killed so far from the U.S. side.
Wow. So we just got some breaking news, which is and it's a statement by the commander of Kahnuj IRGC, and he says Iran intercepted and destroyed U.S. Tomahawk missile in Kerman province. What's your thoughts about that?
No, nothing surprising. Look, the Tomahawks have 2 problems. Is one, they're slow, like most cruise missiles, so they can be taken out. 2, they have a problem with quality. Look, the 12 missiles that the U.S. fired into northern Nigeria, 4 of them didn't explode. They were found. They hit the target. It just didn't explode. When you have a 30% failure to explode rate, that's pretty crappy. That's that wouldn't fit in any competitive industry. You have a failure rate on your product of 30%. So yeah, they have problems. The Tomahawk is not the end all. It's an old technology. Basically, it's one person I know described it as a dumpster flying through the air. They're they're slow. They're not stealthed in any way. They're easy enough to spot with any good radar systems. And S-200s were used before to take them out, and that's an old system. So they're a prime easy target. So no, I'm not surprised in the least. And that's the other problem is that's the main standoff weapon system that the U.S. has, and they're running out. So now what do you do? Once your standoff missiles, sure, U.S. has thousands of JDAMs, but the problem is even with a JDAM ER extra range, that's 85 kilometers. So if you want to bomb Tehran, you got to fly pretty deep inside of Iran to try to drop those bombs. And Iran has a very effective anti-aircraft system. One of the things that they've done, Russia had from the very beginning loitering munitions that were flying around while looking for a target. Target would be a ground target in this case. So ground target would be painted by either a drone or by a reconnaissance team with a laser, and that munition would just come down on top of that target. The Iranians took it one step further. They made loitering munitions as anti-aircraft weapon systems. The F-35s that were taken out, they said, the two main warning systems for a pilot is one, he gets radar, he's lit by radar. So that's a warning that he gets. And the second warning he gets is a launch. The problem with for the Americans is the Iranian systems. They don't use radar. They're heat seeking, and there's a good enough artificial intelligence systems on there that it keeps focus on the propulsion and doesn't go after any of the flares. And B, it's already launched. So what was coming out was these pilots had literally a minute or two to realize they're about to get hit. There was nothing they could do about it except eject or die with the plane. So yeah, the Iranians have a system that works. They also have a shoot and scoot system. They use small trucks. They've got 2-3 anti-aircraft missile systems on there, medium range missile systems on there. They launch them and they're gone. Good luck trying to hit something that's moving 40, 50 kilometers an hour or faster down these dirt roads. By the time those missiles are launched and you've realized they've been launched, the launching platform is already gone. It's several kilometers down the road and speeding away. Or it's just drawn down into an entrance and gone down into an elevator shaft somewhere underground. The U.S. has nothing it can do with it. And if it lands troops on Karg Island or any of these other islands, it's going to be the Stalingrad for the U.S., those troops. When Goering said, don't worry, then circle them in Stalingrad, we could supply them by air. Yeah, how well that turned out? The U.S. would be in the same position. He just basically would be just throwing away those troops to be destroyed.
Great point. Guys, just some more breaking news, which is the B-1 bombers from the UK Fairford have set off and are heading to Iran right now. They're being tracked, and apparently they're only about 2 to 3 hours away. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with that.
Yep, it will be, especially if the S-400s get switched on. This may be a very breaking moment for Trump and his team. So we'll see. We'll see. The thing is the people that can talk any sense to Trump, there's not that many of them left. Vance, Kennedy. Kennedy's been isolated. Vance can only do so much. The people around Trump are psychopaths, sociopaths, so-fronts. They'll do whatever is asked of them because they want the power and their position. So people like Exeth, Ratcliffe. These people aren't going to tell Trump to his face that this is insane. So we'll see. I guess he can continue escalating, but only so far. He's got limited munitions. He's got limited capability. And Iran has flat out stated they're going to destroy every American base, wipe them out. And by the way, there's riots in Kuwait right now, Kuwait City.
Is that? I didn't know about this. Go ahead, explain.
Oh yeah. Oh, they're anti-American riots. People demanding get the U.S. out of Kuwait.
Really?
So yeah, the same thing with Bahrain.
Kuwait going to be Iraq? I didn't know about
there's still riots. Oh yeah. The riots started yesterday. There's riots in Bahrain that are continuing. And by the way, the bridge from Saudi Arabia to Bahrain's been hit. It was hit last week by the Iranians.
That's right.
So it's going to be very hard for Saudi Arabia to continue supporting the Bahraini government with its military. So we could quite literally be seeing a lot of changes in country borders before this is all over in the Middle East. I mean, Saudi Arabia struck a Houthi airstrip. That wasn't the smartest move. The Houthis started striking the Saudis. I mean, this is, it's only a matter of time before Yemen goes, well, those oil-bearing provinces in the southwest, those were ours originally. Saudi Arabia is an artificial construct, like almost every one of those nations. They're all artificial constructs at this point. How long before the Hashemites in Jordan go, well, we're falling all apart. It's Mecca, Medina is actually our territory historically, not the House of Saud. There's a lot of claims in every which way in that direction. Even with the Kuwaitis, Kuwait was the 19th province of Iraq before the British cut out and created Kuwait. So, I mean, there's a lot of old debts and a lot of old disputes, and they all could be coming to a head under this.
We're seeing huge movement of US transport flights from Europe to the Middle East. How big do you think the strikes are going to be in terms of Trump claims that they're going to be bigger than even what occurred during Epstein Fury? Do you think he's just blagging it and he's going to do a tackle like he normally does? Or do you think that something big is coming?
Well, he can do something big. He can flex up, but he can't flex for long. And that's the problem for Trump. He could do a lot of damage for a short time. And the problem is Iran will take the damage. And Iran is inflicting damage back to the U.S. The U.S., the Fifth Fleet, is basically out of the forward command of Fifth Fleet, is basically out of the Persian Gulf. They're in South Carolina now. They're gone. The bases are destroyed. Before all this started back up, there was a report that there was 288 structures on these 13 bases. They're either heavily damaged or destroyed. That's basically everything's leveled, and they're just finishing off whatever's left. The U.S. has lost all these forward deployed areas, and the Arab states, if they want to survive, they need to wake up to the fact that they're not part of the American club of we're all going to protect you. No, you're the front to absorb the damage to defend Israel. It's just it. You're cannon fodder. You want to, having U.S. bases and giving you protection is just making you a big fat target. And launching strikes on Iran by the Saudis and by United Arab Emirates, even though they're screaming, "Oh, we're neutral," but it turns out they're still launching strikes. This pisses the big guy off. The big guy can wipe you out. Do you want to go play this game? I mean, look, Iran counterstroke Kuwait, took out one of the desalination plants. That's 50% of the water. It's 50% of drinkable water. All these countries in the southern Persian Gulf are artificial constructs. Their populations are hundreds of times bigger than they could actually be sustained by natural resources, by water resources in those areas. And the moment you start striking out the electric grid, I mean, you don't have to strike the desalination plants. You just take out the electric grid. No electricity, no desalination, no water. Particularly, I mean, if you look at the UAE was 7 small sheikdoms, or basically 7 small villages with local hetmen and a small port. And now they're all multi-million people cities. Most of the population of UAE were Bedouins, going from oasis to oasis. So now you've got these multi-million people cities that are fully dependent on artificial sources of water. What happens? You know the temperature's down there right now. It's 50 plus degrees, 45, 50 degrees, 100% humidity.
Very, very hot.
Stan, yeah, how long can you survive with no water? Yeah.
Stas, thank you so much for taking your time out to join us. Really appreciate your contribution. Where can people find you? I know you've got a YouTube channel called by your name, right? Or what's your YouTube channel named?
No. The YouTube channel is Mr. Slavic Man, all one word, and Slavic with a K. Also on X at Stanislav Krapivnik. Couldn't fit the whole name in. The names are too long. And also on Telegram, Stas Tudaya Обратно is the Russian channel, and Stas was there is the English channel.
Brilliant. Everyone should definitely check you out on all of them. But thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it.